again to Jay and our speakers from the previous session. It's so valuable to hear directly from advocacy leaders about who they are, what they do, and the powerful roles they play in research. A strong theme for me that came through was building partnerships doesn't start with project, it starts with relationships. It takes time and understanding, and also it takes doing a bit of pre-work, understanding what the advocacy organisations do, what their strategic plans are, what their priorities are, and how the research that you might be interested in doing might actually complement them. Um, and we also want to hear from the researchers in the room. This is not about talking at you or with you, about you. It's about your experience too. And we know many of you have had really great partnerships with advocacy organisations. And we want to hear from you. So please feel free to add your experiences in the chat as well. We don't want you to think that we're just talking at you, because that's certainly not. This is about how we bring all the collective strengths of the advocacy sector, the people with disability, and researchers together. So thank you. The next session is, again, going into building respectful partnerships. And to guide us through this session, I'm delighted to hand over to Professor Linda Steele. Linda is a professor at the University of Technology, Sydney, and a socio-legal researcher focused on disability, law, and social justice. Her work is grounded in human rights and explores the legal and social systems affecting people with disability. Linda will introduce our speakers and lead us through this conversation on how to build those collaborative reciprocal partnerships. So over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Mary. And hello to everyone who's here today. I'm Linda Steele. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining you from the lands of the Wadi Wadi people of Dharawal country. To give a visual description, I am a woman in my 40s with brown hair, wearing a beige top with the background to my room blurred, so I'm working from home today. This session is all about building respectful partnerships between researchers and advocacy organisations. We know from the Dana report that strong partnerships don't just appear. They're built on time, trust, and genuine respect. But too often, partnerships can start with misunderstandings or assumptions that create barriers to working together. So in this session, we're going to be doing some myth busting. The speakers that we have will each challenge a common myth that they often see from researchers, and they will share a real story or experience to show what respectful collaboration looks like from an advocacy perspective. And as you listen, I invite you to reflect in the chat on this question. What's one thing I might do differently to avoid creating burden when I approach advocacy organisations? So let's get started with our first myth. Number one is that one meeting is co-design. Now, this is something that we hear a lot, and NDRP and advocacy organisations hear a lot, that researchers are holding a single meeting and think that that equals a research partnership. To bust this myth, I'm pleased to welcome Megan Spindler-Smith, the Acting CEO of People with Disability. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Linda. So I want to start this discussion with a statement that many of us with disability know probably a little bit too well, is that we've done co-design, we've held a focus group, we've shared the research and got feedback. Then they're ready to move on as though all the work is done. But as noted, one meeting is not co-design. Co-design is not a single event, it's a relationship. It's a process of shared ownership from the first question to the outcome. It's actually about sustained collaborative and is grounded in power sharing. So when done well, co-design isn't a tick box. It's working with people with disability to determine what's the problem we're actually trying to solve, through to embedding of the solution. It's about making sure that it's an authentic voice of respect, rights, resilience, and collective action, which the 5 principles of Queenslanders with Disability Network call the heart of co-design. And we base a lot of our work and the work that we build on that in these concepts. In true co-design, people with disability shape the questions, not just answer it. So we decide what matters. We simply don't just react to what's been proposed. And we see our contributions are able to be carried forward. And a lot of the time we're part of that so that it doesn't just disappear into a beautifully written report. And as somebody who's written some lovely reports in their time, I am always for them, but it's not the way forward in co-design. Genuine co-design is disability-led when it comes to disability spaces. It's not just disability-informed. It includes accessible recruitment, multiple ways for people to participate, and spaces that are psychologically and culturally safe. It makes sure that the most marginalised within our cohort are a first step. So taking a blanket approach to disability means that you need to look at all of the parts, including those within our community that are the most marginalised. It is iterative and accountable. It pauses for a moment to reflect and actually allows for co-sense making or sense making together and refining until what's created truly works for us, but doesn't just look good on paper. Lived experience is more than what we're talking about here. We're talking about lived expertise. It must be more than an anecdote. Lived expertise means experts. Are we included to tell our stories or to apply our systemic knowledge and shape change? That's where an example of this could be participatory action research. Research led by those most impacted, those that it matters to the most. People with lived experience co-design the questions, they collect and analyze the data, and they lead the action. It shifts the control, the voice, and ownership. It's research that truly embodies that concept of nothing about us, and it should be nothing about us without us all. From an advocacy lens, respectful engagement means sharing that power, not simulating inclusion. It means paying people fairly, providing accessible materials, including easy read, offering real choice, and ensuring emotional and structural safety. So ask yourself, who's not yet in the room and how can we make sure they can be? Because co-design is not only best practice, it's actually a human rights obligation under the UN Convention of Rights of People with Disabilities. Co-design can feel slow and messy sometimes. It challenges the assumptions about who has the capacity to hold knowledge and whose voices shape evidence. It challenges the idea that it is not safe or viable for a person to participate in research that directly impacts them. So, to every researcher listening, this is something I want you to ask yourself. When you say co-design, do you mean partnership or do you mean participation? Do you see people with disability as collaborators or as subjects? And would those in the room describe your engagement as respectful, empowering, inclusive, and recognizing of marginalized lived experience? Because co-design is not one meeting, it's a relationship built on trust, accountability, shared purpose. And when it's done right, it changes the research and the people that are involved for the better. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much, Megan. Yeah, so many powerful words included there. Accountability, iterative, relational. Yeah, I think that you've sent such an important message about how deep and meaningful and honest that co-design needs to be. And that co-design takes time and trust and isn't just a one-off conversation or a tick box exercise. So thank you very much. So myth number 2 now is that it's quicker to do it ourselves. So this myth can stop researchers from even reaching out, but often going solo actually creates more work and worse outcomes. So to speak to this, I'm delighted to welcome Jenny Caravalos, co-chair of the Australian Autism Alliance and CEO of DACSA. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. To address the mythbusters, it's quicker to do it ourselves. Let me tell you a story I've titled The Late Invitation, so you can see where this is going. So it starts with a phone call we all know. We'd love for your organisation to be a partner on our grant. Sounds flattering, right? But the people called already had a topic, a plan, and even a catchy acronym for the project. All they needed from us was to access people with lived experience. Now, to be fair, this was not a typical research team. It was actually made up of some people with lived experience of disability themselves, people with some diverse backgrounds, passionate about changing systems that hadn't worked for them. But here's the tricky part. They still had a researcher's mindset. And what we quickly realised, well, what was missing was the how, who to reach, how to reach them, what good engagement would look like in ways that are safe, accessible, practical, and of course, being funded. Now, how to research what already exists before reinventing the wheel, and how to compare approaches meaningfully. And like many research teams, they'd already fallen in love with their own concept. They were sure they had the perfect answer. They just wanted us to help validate it. And there were also gaps in the team. Brilliant researchers, some with lived experience, yes, but not enough advocacy voices, not enough policy connections. So by the time we were brought in, it was too late to reframe the scope that was too narrow and nuanced, or to approach the partnerships and expand them that gave the grant more strength. And what's the result? Despite good intentions and real expertise, the proposal struggled to convince the reviewers it had the breadth and the partnerships required, and it definitely didn't answer the right problem to be solved. Now, the irony, it wasn't about not valuing lived experience on the team. They had that, but they didn't have it on the design. So trying to save time by designing it alone ended up costing time and the right solution. It was about recognizing that lived experience inside a research team isn't the same as partnering with the broader lived experience community or tapping into the expertise, the lived expertise, as Megan said. So what we learned was that co-design is more than inclusion, it is collaboration. Diversity within a team doesn't replace partnership between teams. And the real speed comes from starting together, not catching up later. So when disability representative organisations and lived experience voices are at the table early, without a purely research lens, they can help scope the right problem, identify the gaps, and make the work meaningful and doable. Because co-design doesn't slow you down, it helps you start in the right direction. So we all know it's not co-design if the design's already done and you're just sprinkling lived experience on top. Better scoping brings better outcomes, especially in diverse communities, which include autism, where often those with non-speaking voices are not heard at all. So next time someone says, it's quicker if we do it ourselves, tell them about the late invitation, because the fastest way forward is working side by side from day one. That's not a shortcut, it's a path to success. Thanks for listening to me today.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Yeah, so many important messages in there, particularly, that we shouldn't be too fixated on speed, and to get the foundations right or the direction right is really important to the subsequent stages of the research and the ultimate success and how meaningful and impactful that research will be. So thank you. And this is such a clear example of how slowing down early, as you said, can save time and effort later on, and also build trust and be taking the right approach to research along the way. So myth number 3 is that advocacy groups only represent a few voices. So this assumption can really undermine the value of advocacy organisations, when in reality, those organisations bring broad expertise, deep connections, and lived experience from their communities, which we particularly heard about in the last session. To challenge this myth, we're going to be joined by Jeremy Muir and Sarah McInnes from Physical Disability Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Megan and Jenny. They already know I'm a big fan of theirs. So yes, our myth is to disapprove the unhelpful myth that advocacy groups like ours only represent a small number of voices. So this is simply not the case. PDA doesn't just represent people who perhaps use a wheelchair or a mobility device. And according to the 2022 ABS statistics, which I know researchers love statistics, of the 5.5 million Australians living with disability, 75.3% report living with a physical disability as their primary disability. So we also represent people who are living with invisible disabilities and those that have intersections of disabilities. An example of this would be perhaps rheumatoid arthritis. And I'll hand over to my colleague, Sarah.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. So as Jeremy said, I'm Sarah. So PDA represents people like myself living with an invisible disability that greatly affects my mobility and other aspects of my life. In fact, representative advocacy organisations like PDA are built upon rigorous, ongoing consultation with our community. We engage with people all across the country by facilitating peer network events, informative webinars. For example, our most recent webinars have discussed equitable healthcare and the intersectionality of physical disability and psychosocial disability. We also conduct surveys and direct consultation and collaboration with other advocacy bodies within our sector to ensure the work we do accurately reflects the needs of our community. We don't claim to speak for everyone, but we work hard to include as many voices as possible. When and where possible, we try to give a voice to those who believe they don't have one. Our role is to amplify the collective concerns, aspirations, and experiences of our community that is grounded in lived expertise and informed by data. Like many of us here today, we use evidence to inform our advocacy. But when we bring insights to government, research panels, or policy roundtables, we bring them on behalf of a community that has entrusted us with their stories, struggles, and solutions. To suggest that this kind of advocacy only represents a few voices not only misrepresents our work, but it also risks marginalising the people research and policy aim to include. If we are serious about co-designing systems that are equitable and effective, we must value representative advocacy as a legitimate and vital form of knowledge, one that is community-led, ever-evolving, and deeply accountable to the people it serves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy and Sarah. That was a powerful reminder about that advocacy organisations are deeply connected to their communities and bring far more than just one perspective. And I think also, really flagging the importance of recognising advocacy and the experiences and expertise of members